This is the story of a preschool, where children began turning up with strange, secret incisions on their skin, done with sharp objects, and without their parents' knowledge. What began as a few unexplained marks would soon unravel into a disturbing theory, an organized, possibly occult ritual hidden behind classroom walls, a reminder for every parent to stay vigilant. Sandra had always been a vigilant mother, keenly aware of every scrape and bruise her 3-year-old son, Jacob, came home with. But nothing had prepared her for the discovery she made one quiet afternoon as she was helping him change into his pajamas. Jacob had been complaining about an itch on his back for the past few days. At first, Sandra thought it was just an ordinary child's complaint, something easily soothed by a quick scratch. But when he started repeatedly asking her to help him scratch the same spot, her curiosity piqued. Sandra leaned in, brushing the fabric of his shirt aside, and her breath caught in her throat. There, on the back of her son, were faint but unmistakable marks, a series of tiny, straight incisions, like someone had used a sharp object to cut him. They were barely visible, but when she ran her fingers over the skin, she could feel the uneven texture, as though the cuts were still in the process of healing. It didn't make sense. Jacob hadn't been in any accidents, and he hadn't mentioned any unusual pain or discomfort, just the constant itching. Her heart began to race as panic set in. "Jacob, how did these marks get on your back?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. He just stared at her with wide, innocent eyes. "I don't know, Mommy," he replied, his voice tinged with confusion. "It just hurts and itches." Sandra asked him again and then again over the next 2 days. But each time, Jacob's response was the same. He had no memory of how the marks appeared. It was as if they had mysteriously appeared overnight. Her mind raced, thoughts tumbling over one another. Could it be some sort of insect bite? No, these marks didn't look like anything she'd ever seen before. Could it be something more sinister? She tried to push away the fear, but it lingered. The incision-like marks seemed to be healing, but there was no explanation for how they got there. Was it an accident at school? Had he been scratched by another child? Or was something darker at play? The uncertainty gnawed at her. She prayed for her son, hoping for an answer that would make sense, hoping it was nothing more than a strange, benign occurrence. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Days passed, and Jacob's condition worsened. He developed a fever, his tiny body flushed with heat. Sandra rushed him to the doctor, describing the strange marks and his growing illness. After a series of blood tests, the doctor confirmed what Sandra had feared, an infection. They prescribed antibiotics, and Sandra hoped that would be the end of it. But when she returned home, her worries only deepened. 2 days later, Jacob's fever spiked again, and he began vomiting uncontrollably. His temperature soared, and the tiny marks on his back seemed to worsen, though Sandra couldn't quite explain how. She was terrified now, unsure of what was happening to her son. Unable to take him to school, she called her close friend, Anita, who lived just down the street. Anita had a 2-year-old daughter, and the two mothers often shared their experiences, comparing notes on their children's health and development. Anita had been a comforting presence throughout Sandra's motherhood journey, and Sandra needed her now more than ever. Anita arrived at Sandra's house that afternoon, a sympathetic smile on her face. After hearing about Jacob's symptoms and the strange marks on his back, she assured her friend, "Don't worry, Sandra. It's probably something minor. Maybe he got scratched while playing at school or on the playground. Kids are always getting into things." Sandra wasn't convinced, but she appreciated Anita's attempt to ease her anxiety. After all, Anita's daughter had recently been sick with a fever, and Sandra had seen her bouncing back to normal. Perhaps it really was just a passing issue. But after leaving Sandra's house, Anita couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to the situation than she had let on. As she walked through her own front door, she decided to check her daughter for any signs of illness, just in case. It didn't take long for Anita to discover something that sent a chill down her spine. Just like Sandra's son, her daughter had the same faint marks on her body. Tiny, incision-like scratches that seemed to be healing. Anita's heart stopped as she stared at the marks on her daughter's skin. Was this just a coincidence? In a state of growing concern, Anita approached her daughter. "Sweetheart, how did you get these marks?" she asked gently, though a knot formed in her stomach. Her daughter, still young and unable to hide much, simply replied, "Teacher put pepper on my back at school." Anita's blood ran cold. "Pepper? What do you mean, sweetheart?" The girl, oblivious to the gravity of her words, continued, "Teacher took me to the restroom, and she put something on my back. It hurt, and then it burned." Anita's mind reeled. Her daughter and Sandra's son both attended the same school. Could it be possible that the same teacher was involved? The marks, the fever, the mysterious actions of the children's teacher. This was no longer just a minor concern. It was something far more serious. Anita rushed back to Sandra's house, her heart pounding in her chest. When she told Sandra what her daughter had said, the air in the room seemed to grow heavy. The two mothers stood in stunned silence, both realizing that they were caught in the middle of something far darker than either of them could have imagined. And the more they thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit. Something was terribly wrong at that school, and the children's teacher was at the heart of it all. That night was unlike any other for Anita and her husband, Raymond. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind against the windows, set their nerves further on edge. They lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, minds spinning with fear and confusion. Their 2-year-old daughter, Ava, had said her teacher put something, pepper, she called it, on her back in the restroom. And now the marks, identical to the ones on Jacob, Sandra's son. A few days after those marks appeared, Jacob had fallen severely ill, and his condition was only getting worse. It didn't take a doctor to piece together that this wasn't some playground injury. Something had been done to these children. Raymond sat up abruptly in the darkness, running a hand over his face. Are we supposed to just sit here and wait for her to start vomiting too? Wait for a fever to spike and rush to the hospital in a panic like Sandra? Anita didn't answer. She was already out of bed, barefoot, tiptoeing down the hall for the 3rd time that night. She quietly opened the door to Ava's room and peeked in. The little girl lay there peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling. But even the sight of her resting safely brought no comfort. Anita's maternal instinct was screaming. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. Back in their bedroom, Raymond voiced the question neither of them wanted to ask. What if this was done intentionally? Anita turned to face him slowly, whispering, "To infect them?" He nodded. If the cuts were deliberate, and there's an infection involved, then what kind of infection is it? Is it viral? Is it contagious? Was it targeted? She swallowed hard, trying to hold herself together. Or worse, what if this is some kind of ritual? An initiation. That word, initiation, lingered like smoke in the room, chilled both of them to the bone. It sounded absurd, the stuff of horror movies or urban legends, but nothing about the situation made sense anymore. Why would a teacher make incisions on toddlers? Why in the restroom? Why was she applying anything at all to their skin? And if it happened to their children, how many others had it happened to? They both sat in silence for a long time, watching the clock on the wall slowly tick toward morning. Their decision was clear: they had to confront the school. By 7:30 a.m., Anita, Raymond, Sandra, and a weak-looking Jacob were sitting in the small reception area of the neighborhood school. The principal, a weary-eyed man in his 50s, looked uncomfortable as the accused teacher, Miss Laura, was called in. Miss Laura appeared calm, but too calm. Her arms folded across her chest, her eyes steely and defensive. When the allegations were explained to her, she scoffed and immediately took offense. "I have never laid a finger on any child in this school, let alone done something so horrible," she snapped. "Whatever you think you saw, it wasn't me." Anita was livid. "My daughter told me you took her to the restroom and put something on her back. She has the marks. You want to explain that?" Miss Laura shook her head, deflecting every accusation. She insisted the children were either making things up or misinterpreting some accidental scratches. Children that age are imaginative. Maybe they got bitten by bugs or scratched themselves playing. But the way she avoided their eyes, the way her hands fidgeted slightly behind the table, didn't sit right. It didn't feel like the reaction of an innocent person. The principal offered no clear resolution, merely suggesting that they allow the appropriate authorities to investigate. It was a dead end, for now. But the four of them, Sandra, Anita, Raymond, and Jacob, knew they couldn't let it go. They went straight to the local police department. The moment the complaint was filed, the atmosphere shifted. What had started as a mysterious health concern for one child became the spark that ignited a deeper, more chilling investigation. Officers began looking into the matter, starting with health records, classroom attendance logs, and interviewing other teachers. The school nurse was brought in, and, critically, a letter was sent to parents, urging them to inspect their children's bodies for any strange marks or recent illnesses. That's when the real horror began. Within days, parents flooded the school office and police department with alarming discoveries. Several other children, 12 in total, were found to have similar faint incisions on their backs, some barely visible, others still fresh. Almost all of them had either fallen sick with unexplained fevers or had recently recovered from one. The pattern was undeniable. The incisions weren't accidental. The illnesses weren't random. And the connection to that school was ironclad. Even worse, some of the children recalled being taken alone to the restroom or a quiet room by one of the teachers. Not always Miss Laura. There were whispers now that other staff members might be involved. Something dark was unraveling. Then came the chilling revelation. One of the teachers, recently dismissed quietly by the school, had once been questioned in another district over similar allegations. Nothing had ever been proven. The case was buried. No charges filed. That teacher had found employment here in the sleepy suburb where no one thought to ask too many questions. And suddenly, what Sandra thought was a one-off nightmare for her child had blown into a full-scale investigation into a possible ring of abuse, cover-up, and, some feared, even occult involvement. A nurse's assistant had abruptly gone missing. Records were found to be missing from the school's infirmary. The authorities believed the incisions were intentional and possibly part of an experiment or initiation rite, though they weren't ready to confirm anything publicly. The community was in chaos. Parents were yanking their children from the school in droves. News vans began circling the neighborhood, and behind closed doors, whispers turned into screams of fear and rage. Sandra looked at her son, frail, pale, still fighting off the infection, and felt the weight of something much bigger than herself pressing in. Anita clutched her daughter's tiny hand, now terrified to leave her even for a second. They weren't just mothers anymore. They were survivors of something dark, something that had grown like a disease right in their children's classroom. And it was only just beginning. In the days that followed the shocking discoveries, Silverwood, a quiet, sleepy town where everyone knew each other, transformed into a community gripped by fear. What was once a place of trust and safety became the epicenter of whispered rumors and sleepless nights. More and more parents came forward, checking their children's bodies, and finding the same mysterious incisions. Some had healed, some were fresh, but all had one terrifying thing in common. None of the children could clearly recall what happened, only fragmented memories of being led away from the classroom by adults they were supposed to trust. The infection Sandra's son had wasn't an isolated case. Blood tests revealed similar results in 4 other children, signs of a specific, but unnamed bacterial infection. One that could only be transmitted through open wounds. The police, now treating the case as a potential criminal conspiracy, intensified their investigation. They interviewed staff, raided storage closets, and eventually uncovered something horrifying. In a hidden cabinet in the school's unused supply room, officers found a small, locked metal box. Inside, sterile surgical blades, latex gloves, pepper extract, and an unmarked plastic container with traces of the same bacteria found in the infected children. Visual suggestion. Simulated dramatic reenactment of gloves being pulled out of a box, a surgical blade glinting under fluorescent light. It was now undeniable. Someone, or perhaps several people, had deliberately cut into these children, applied substances to their wounds, and possibly even injected or introduced bacteria. But why? Was it medical experimentation, a twisted psychological operation, or something far more sinister? Rumors began swirling through the town. Some whispered of occult practices. Others believed it was part of a rogue scientific trial, using children as unsuspecting test subjects. But no one, not even the investigators, had definitive answers. The accused teacher, Miss Laura, was suspended immediately. But when the authorities attempted to detain her for further questioning, they discovered she had disappeared. Gone. Vanished without a trace. Visual suggestion. Empty house with the front door slightly ajar, suitcases missing, eerie music swelling. Her phone was off, her home abandoned, and any attempt to track her led to a dead end. But then, a break in the case. A parent, whose child had recently recovered from a fever and had one of the now familiar back marks, checked their home security footage. What they found sent chills down their spine. On one afternoon, a school staff member, a man no one had questioned yet, was seen approaching the front door after school hours. The child was home alone with a babysitter who, by coincidence, had stepped out briefly. The man was seen standing by the front window watching for nearly 5 full minutes before turning and walking away. That man was a janitor hired by the school just 6 months earlier. Police raided his apartment later that night. What they found only deepened the mystery. Inside his room, photos of children, all from the same school. Most of them were marked with red symbols. A crudely drawn diagram that appeared to be of a human back with specific points circled. And perhaps most chilling of all, an old leather-bound notebook filled with strange writings in a mix of English and Latin. One phrase was repeated over and over: "Mark the chosen, the fever cleanses." Visual suggestion. Simulated shot of torn notebook pages, scribbled drawings, eerie chanting echo faintly. Was this a cult? A belief system? A plan? No one could say for sure, but it was clear that something had been happening within those school walls for months, possibly longer. Something that had slipped past the eyes of teachers, administrators, and parents alike. The janitor was arrested, but he refused to speak. Not a word. No confession. No denial. Only a haunting stare and a single sentence when finally prompted. "You'll understand when it's time." The school was shut down indefinitely. Investigators uncovered disturbing footage from internal security cameras, conveniently muted and partially erased. But what remained was enough to confirm that at least 3 staff members had access to isolated rooms with no supervision and no monitoring. One room, labeled Therapeutic Quiet Room, had no actual therapy equipment, just a single chair, a sink, gloves, and locked drawers. Meanwhile, several children, now home and under medical supervision, began opening up slowly. Some mentioned the Red Room. Others remembered being told not to tell their parents, or the fever man will come back. Parents in the community were broken, devastated. Many had trusted the school for years, never imagining such horror could unfold behind closed doors. Lawsuits began piling up. Therapists were brought in. The town held a candlelight vigil for the children, for the trauma, the fear, and the unanswered questions. And yet, even after arrests, shutdowns, and investigations, no motive was ever fully confirmed. The janitor remained silent. Miss Laura was never found. The bacteria strain was never matched to any known experimental research, and no organization or cult stepped forward to claim the axe. Simply stopped, or so it seemed. Sandra's son, Jacob, slowly recovered. Anita's daughter, Ava, thankfully, never developed the full-blown infection, but neither mother would ever be the same again. Their story became the spark that exposed a hidden evil in a quiet town. And to this day, no one knows how deep it truly went. Innocence violated, trust shattered, and a silence that echoes louder than any scream. What really happened at that school in Silverwood? And is it really over?